Rise Up and Run. Stories of deliverance and transformation through the power of Jesus Christ that allows people to rise up from bondage and run in freedom. I'm your host, Janice. Hey there, this is Janice, and welcome to another episode of Rise Up and Run. Today, I am going to be interviewing my new friend, Meach, and we're going to talk about his liberation with Christ after Islam. So, Meach, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You bet. And like I told him earlier, I said, you have a voice for radio. I even asked him if he would say, hey, baby, like Barry White, but he wouldn't do it for me. So, Meach, why don't you introduce the listeners to you and me? Because honestly, I don't really know you that well.
Okay, all right. Well, my full name is Shuaib Meacham, and everybody in my family has a nickname Meach, being Meacham.
Everybody is nicknamed Meach?
Well, we have a joke is that if we're at a family gathering and someone says, hey, Meach, everybody looks up.
Well, I was going to say, I bet that would be a problem.
Uh-huh.
So, okay, everyone's named Meach.
So I'm a professor at the University of Northern Iowa right now, and my area is literacy, and very important related to this topic is there's a tradition in African American literacy of literacy being viewed as a form of liberation.
Sure, I can see that.
So one of the most inspiring literacy stories from African American culture and history is Malcolm X, and the autobiography of Malcolm X in particular. So there would be no Malcolm X if he wasn't incarcerated and basically used his time incarcerated to copy out the entire dictionary. He said that, by copying and putting, writing out the entire dictionary in notebooks, it changed his vocabulary, it changed his perception. He was able to get knowledge that he otherwise wouldn't have had. And so that story just really fascinated me.
Wow. How long was he incarcerated?
I can't remember exactly how long. I think it was about 10 years or so.
Wow, I didn't know that.
But one of the things that he talks about, he was always admiring the educated, eloquent prisoners that he was incarcerated with, and he wanted to be like them, but he had no real education. He said, I could talk street talk, but when it comes to expressing myself in an educated manner, as he was watching these prisoners debate one another, he said I couldn't do it. And he said rather than do nothing, I just started writing out the dictionary.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and he just wrote out the whole dictionary.
Man.
Yeah, and so that transformed his mind, and so that sort of impact of literacy always fascinated me.
Well, and you've got a great program going on that we're going to talk about at the end, because
All right.
I don't really know. I've heard about it, but I really don't know what it's about. So I can't wait to.
Yeah, and it's a kind of an extension of all of that.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about that as well.
So give us a background of where you grew up, what your family life was like.
Okay, I'm originally from Canton, Ohio, which for NFL football fans will recognize as the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And Ohio is just a football crazy place, and high school football. I tell people the high school football stadium is as big as UNI Stadium, and so that's the kind of environment. But then I was a trader to the state of Ohio. I went to the University of Michigan for college, and then it was during my graduate program, getting my master's, I really developed this passion for literacy education.
Okay, so what did you study at Michigan?
First degree was in creative writing and literature.
Oh gosh, okay, and then your master's was in what?
Reading and literacy education.
Okay, were you raised in an intact family?
Both of my mother and father. There's a long education history of my family. So I have a PhD, but I'm like a second generation PhD. I had a great uncle who had a PhD in 1935.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So education's always been very big in my family, and that's, kind of what we celebrate and people get celebrated for.
That is great.
I was just carrying on that tradition.
So do I need to call you Dr. Meach from now on?
No.
Okay, just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what about your faith life growing up? What kind of a home were you raised in? Was there religion?
Yeah, well, the church, was, very important, but, as I've grown to discover in my walk with the Lord, is a big difference between going to church and really knowing Jesus. And so
Yes.
at that time, I was, in a family, went to church on Sunday and Sunday school and that kind of thing. But as I grew older and started having my own questions, what I was getting there really wasn't sufficient.
What do you, oh, sorry. What do you think you were looking for? That wasn't like, you just kind of have that hole that you're missing
that's
something.
basically what it is. You need a closeness with God, and just going to church and going through those worship ceremonies or whatever just wasn't addressing that. Mm-hmm. And so I just had this restlessness that was always there, and it wasn't until I as an undergraduate, and this is where I start to get to Islam. I had a classmate in a philosophy class, and I was really frustrated in the philosophy class. I thought I was going to get some answers there, and the professor was just interested in playing kind of mental games and mental gymnastics, and I was really disaffected. But this classmate, he was an older gentleman, so I'm in my late teens, early 20s, and he's probably in his mid 40s. And he just had a sense of presence about himself. He wasn't letting what the professor was doing get to him, and we would talk after class, and so there was something about him that I liked, just being around him. And it wasn't until after the class was over and during the summertime that he actually told me about Islam. And
Oh, okay.
yeah,
So you were a Christian up until this point.
Yeah.
Like in college, were you going to church, or were you just kind of like,
I was going to church.
Okay.
But again, it really wasn't addressing that restlessness I had.
okay,
And
great.
so
Okay.
then I started seeing that, so I just needed something else because, my mind and, being a young man, you just, young men in general just having like extreme dispositions.
Yeah.
And so as I was, struggling with that, I realized I wasn't getting, what was really going to help me from going to church. And so I stopped going to church, and I started to really kind of reel a little bit. And as I encountered my friend in the summertime, I just saw that here's a person who at least has some sort of sense of peace. I wouldn't have been able to articulate it as peace at that time, but there was something settled about him. He wasn't just kind of energy all over the place. He had a sense of presence, and there was something about the way he carried himself that I wanted. And
Yeah. Attraction.
and so and as I said, in the summertime he began to talk about the Quran and talk about Allah, and we would just sit, literally, we would just sit on this corner on Michigan's, University of Michigan's campus and just kind of watch life go by, and he would just tell me certain things about the Quran and that sort of thing. So, it's just given, that sense of, presence about him, and realizing, okay, that's something that I want, that I think is more enduring than what I'm getting through education or getting through going to church. I was, whatever it took, I was open for it.
And then did he attribute his peaceful nature to
Well,
the
what was interesting
Islam?
about him was that he was like Orthodox Muslim in the sense that he wasn't, what's called a black Muslim. So Malcolm X was part of what's called the Nation of Islam,
Okay.
which is different than Orthodox Islam.
Can you explain the difference for me?
Okay, the Nation of Islam, and it's very prominent in America's prisons. The figure associated, the main figure associated with the Nation of Islam at that time was a man called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so he said that black men or black people were the original men, and that white people and racism was almost like a defective, sort of phenomenon. And so in contrast to everything else in society where black people are inferior, black people are looked down upon, he's really saying, black people, you are, like the original men.
I can certainly understand why African American
Yeah,
men would
exactly
like
very
that,
powerful,
because
absolutely. And then you get somebody like Malcolm X, who was just a brilliant orator. If anybody hasn't done so, I encourage you to go on YouTube and find videos of Malcolm X speaking. I mean, it is one of the most magnetic, oratorial figures that you could possibly find. And so, given his mastery, again, the same kind of energy he put into learning the dictionary and increasing his vocabulary, he put that into mastering the religion of the Nation of Islam. And so he was their most prominent spokesperson.
Okay, so that was the Nation of Islam. And
Yeah.
then what was the other? Orthodox.
Orthodox Islam.
What's that?
So Orthodox Islam is the religion that is kind of an extension of the Judeo-Christian tradition that you have in Judaism and Christianity. And so even the Quran, it has, people of, children of Israel. And then you have, I don't know if the Quran calls them Christians, but you have basically Christians, and then Muhammad is like a prophet after, Jesus. Jesus is just a prophet in Islam, and so the prophet after Jesus is Muhammad. And so he has, his own tradition that, came out of, that region of the world, Mecca and Saudi Arabia. And so the religion of Islam, worshiping one God, is the Islamic expression of worshiping one God kind of comes from that part of the world. And so that's where you have the rituals of praying 5 times a day, fasting during the month of Ramadan, which I believe is happening right now. And you have, it's not a tithe, but it's kind of like a tithe called zakat. And so those are basically 3 of the 5 pillars of Islam. So prayer, fasting, zakat, and then the other one is the pilgrimage to Mecca once in your lifetime during a certain period of the year, is when Muslims are instructed to make the pilgrimage to Mecca.
Have you ever done that?
I've been to Mecca, but I haven't done the pilgrimage. The pilgrimage is, if you can imagine, millions of people at the same time converging on, a very small place, and it's just,
Sounds a little chaotic.
Yeah, it is. A lot of
Crowded.
people die every single.
Do they?
Yeah.
From what? Like?
Being trampled.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're trying to do all kinds of things to eliminate that, but yeah, that's a pretty common phenomenon.
So was it then shortly after you met that fellow that you decided that Islam was for you?
Yes. So I started to, and it was the type of thing going from, like I said, I'd stopped going to church, called myself Stop Believing in God. And so you go from that to, at least something. That's where I just credit, Islam saved my life. I was really in a downward spiral, prior to that. And that just, gave me, a foothold, with higher power, whatever you want to, call God. At that point, and I felt like I really needed that, because I was just spiraling, without that. And so that gave me, and then there's community. I just had a wonderful experience being part of the Muslim brotherhood and sisterhood, and that whole community experience. Going to, so you pray 5 times a day, and you're supposed to, pray as many times as possible in the mosque. And so it's seeing people on a regular basis. Hospitality is, at a whole nother level, with Islamic religion. And so it's funny, before Islam, I didn't even eat spicy food. And all these
Is that a requirement?
Yeah, so I had all these friends from India, Pakistan, and Malaysia, and they all had spicy cuisine, and they give give you food, So if you're undergrad, young 20-something undergrad, and people just giving food all the time, so that changed my whole culinary palate.
I bet it did. You burned it off.
Oh yeah, one time I'll never forget. I was in the kitchen, and there's this tiny little green pepper on the table, and I just kind of picked it up and just took a small bite of it. Oh my goodness! I
Oh,
mean, the sweat and came down my face. I couldn't breathe. I don't know what was going on.
so what was mom and dad's reaction when you went home and said, "Guess what? I'm not a Christian now. I'm a Muslim."
Wow, that got intense for a while
Yeah.
because I was the type of person, like, if I was embrace something, I was like, to the extreme with it.
Okay. Yeah.
So that created a lot of tension and problem. But like I said, it kept me alive. I was really spiraling, and and it was. I mean, it wasn't something to the extent I got disowned or anything, but it was just created a tense environment because I was full, 100% going for it, and they didn't understand what was going on, and but that also, there's positive things that come from being disciplined and focused, and they didn't understand the big picture of why I was doing it, but they could see, okay, at least we got our son, and he's healthy, and he's
Seems to be doing
yeah,
good.
yeah.
So when you were a child coming up, did your church, I don't want to say practice, but did they believe in getting saved, like accepting Christ as your savior?
that wasn't a common. That wasn't really part of the language of
Okay.
any of the churches
So you wouldn't,
that I
and
attended. Yeah,
now that you are a believer in Christ,
yeah,
you have accepted
absolutely.
Christ. So
Yeah.
you hadn't done that before. So
Yeah,
it wasn't like you
yeah.
accepted him
No,
and
so I
then
was going
went
to
to
church.
Muslim.
Like I said, I was going to church, versus knowing Jesus.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know Jesus by getting saved and having that relationship with Him, and knowing, the power of the Holy Spirit, and what He does for you. That whole experience of the Trinity, which is probably the biggest hurdle coming out of Islam, because the Quran, speaks specifically against the idea of the Trinity.
Okay.
And so that was, kind of difficult to fully embrace, because for, that whole decade I was a Muslim, that was just something that was absolutely,
Well,
not a part of,
the
what
tr-
I believed.
the Trinity is hard enough to understand
Yeah.
when you don't
Yeah,
have that background.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what? Same guy, but different?
Yeah.
So if you had to say what the basic differences are between Muslim or Islam and Christianity, and I know you talked about Muhammad being the next prophet.
Yeah.
How would you put that in a nutshell for?
Well, one of the important things, one of the reasons I'm always excited to talk about this, is because people like to make a parallel between Jesus and Muhammad and the Quran and the Bible, as if they're kind of parallel types of things. But actually, what's more accurate, because there really is no comparable person or deity to Jesus. There's just there just isn't, because the fullness of, and what I was looking for, of salvation, where God literally makes Himself human to take on our sin. And that was one of the big things, because there's really no elimination or no salvation from sin in Islam. So that's one of the big differences.
So what do they think when you sin? Just,
Well, I mean, there's sin and there's consequences of sin, and they believe in hell and all of that kind of thing. But there's no security from that sin.
okay.
So, for example, there's, in addition to the Quran, they have what are called hadith. And those are kind of very rigorously documented, people observing and documenting the life of the Prophet Muhammad. And so there are different levels of, it's almost like criteria for a hadith being true or a hadith being made up by somebody. And so there are these collections, and so these collections are known for their trustworthiness versus, they have a lot of things which haven't been demonstrated to be factual. And so it's almost like the school of scholars who study these things to make sure that there's a kind of a genealogy. So let's say you observed, the Prophet Muhammad, there's people who study, everything that comes from you, your character, your background, so that, you are a trustworthy person to believe that what you said the Prophet Muhammad did, he actually did. And so they're like these collections. So it's actually in many ways more of an impact on the practice of Muslims than the Quran, because everything, the prayers, the fast, all of these things are basically what the Prophet Muhammad did, and the way you do them is based on these observers who documented his actions.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there's a reliable hadith that talks about, and it really gets at the difference between Islam and Christianity where it relates to salvation. It says you can be a person of paradise, believing in God, doing the things that good Muslims do, and you can live your whole life as a person of paradise and come within what they call an arm's length between yourself and paradise, but then right before you die, you abandon that and you basically where they could become a person of hellfire.
Oh.
You change your attitude, you stop believing God, and then you die, in that state, and you go to hell. So you can be your whole life,
It's not guaranteed.
Yeah, there's no security. And so by the same token, you can be a person of hellfire your whole life, just not believing God, doing the wrong thing, turn your life around, give your life to God, and start, becoming a person of paradise, and you die in that condition, you go to paradise. So, that was very unsettling,
Yeah, I can see why. Nothing certain.
Yeah, and then, if you're dealing with sin and, it's just, with any of us, just that struggle, it's nothing you ever master or feel, okay, you got it under control,
Right. And if you do, then you don't.
Yeah, exactly. So Jesus is our guarantee.
Yes.
He died on that cross, and everything that we did or could do or will do,
Yeah.
he covered it with the power of that crucifixion. So there's nothing, that's why I said there's no real comparable figure to Jesus in Islam. Even Jesus himself in Islam is not the Jesus that we know as Christians.
Yeah. So you were a Muslim for 10 years?
Yeah,
Everything-
approximately 10 years.
Everything was going good? You were just living life?
Well,
No?
What happened is kind of funny what really started. So like I said, I had some great experiences. I actually went to Mecca. So when I graduated from college, I wanted to experience Islam as fully as I could. And, so I was going to the University of Michigan where, Muslims from all over the world, pray together and worship together. And, they became friends of mine. And you hear they came from, countries where Islam is the dominant religion. And so they're talking about, okay, middle of the day, they have what's called a call to prayer. So 5 daily prayers, you're supposed to do them in the mosque. And so they alert people to the time to pray by having somebody, literally, now in contemporary days, on a loudspeaker, issue a call to prayer.
What does that sound like?
So let me see. The first part is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So it means God is great. God is great. And so this is Allahu Akbar. So it's like this loud, voluminous call. God is great. And so it's alerting you, okay, it's time to pray.
Oh, and then everyone just drops down wherever they
they're
are?
Supposed to.
Okay.
It doesn't happen that way. Very few people actually follow through in that manner.
Okay.
But they're supposed to. You're supposed to stop whatever you're doing and go to the mosque.
Okay.
But very few people actually do it, which was kind of disillusioning because, you're thinking, oh, this is your religion, and, I didn't grow up in it, and here you have, you can go, you live in a place where they're going to do the call to prayer, and you're not going to stop, so that was kind of, so I was like,
that didn't
oddity.
Sit right with you there.
Yeah. But for there, I was like, this oddity because I actually stopped and, went to the mosque and did that 5 times a day.
You seem pretty like you're going to do it or you're not going to do it.
That's right.
I'm going to go all in or I'm not going in at all.
Exactly. exactly.
And so was that kind of disillusioning then but it's a lot like Christianity,
It's just
where we're
like,
great Christians on Sunday, and then
exactly.
Monday comes and
That's right.
woohoo!
That's right. Yeah, so that really it was kind of just disturbing, for, just, being somebody who appreciated what that, could have meant to have lived in a place where you could hear the call and just respond to it. Whereas, if there's only like, I think, one place in the United States that actually does that, and that's Dearborn, Michigan.
Oh.
Yeah, so that has one of the largest Arab populations in the country. And so they actually have a mosque where they issue the call to prayer. And then because it's in the United States, a much greater percentage of the people will stop what they're doing. They'll close their shops, near the mosque and go pray versus, what you would find, even in their own countries, for people who live in a Muslim country.
So I'm going to take a break here.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point did you realize that it was no longer your thing, or, something that you held dear anymore?
Well, again, what I was after from the very beginning was a quality of relationship with God, and compared to not believing in God at all or just going to church and going through the motions, Islam and the 5 daily prayers, was very fulfilling. But then after, especially, I joined the Navy, and I continued to practice Islam in the Navy. And so after a few years, I'd been, kind of going through not going through the motions. I was still very serious about it. But, really the struggle with sin.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really feel at any point like you're close to God, because the more you're aware of sin, I think it even talks about in Colossians, the more conscious you are of sin, it's just like a multiplying effect.
Mm-hmm.
There's really nothing that you can do as a human being to eliminate that.
Did you feel like it was ritualistic a little bit, or maybe not even a little bit, but we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do this?
Well, it's still, when you stop whatever it is you're doing and, then you focus on God or meditate, and basically the Islamic prayer is a kind of meditation that you go through with certain physical motions that are part of that. If you stop what you're doing and you meditate and you calm your mind and you focus on something spiritual, it's going to have a positive effect.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you just stop and take a deep breath and slowly let the air out. You do that 5 times, it's going to have a calming effect on you. It's almost just in human physiology for that to happen. So it was still, a positive thing, but, I just started to experience limitations.
Yeah.
To where you're going, it's more like, you're doing all of this, but still wasn't getting the closeness to God that I was looking for.
You were searching for a long time.
Exactly.
When you just don't feel, because I was like that too. It was like, I just don't, there's something missing here.
Yeah, something missing.
Yeah.
Something, you get that sense of something more.
Yes. So I think we're going to just stop right here for this week, and we will pick it up at our next episode. Okay?
All right, sounds good.